Hey, Andrew. Hey, Steve. Nice to have you both here. So why don't you, Andrew, why don't you start? Why don't you introduce yourself, give your title, your company, and a little bit about your company?
I'm Andrew Caldwell, the CEO of Shmoop. We provide award-winning test prep and a social emotional learning or mental well-being platform for schools across this country.
Cool, thanks. And Steve?
Steve Ray, I'm responsible for innovation at Carnegie Learning and been with them for a couple of years. Before that, I was with IBM and Berlitz and a number of other companies, but excited to be with you here today.
Cool, glad to have you. So let's get started on some questions here. As a news media and research company and all the travel that we do throughout the US and the different regions, we really try and focus school and teacher attention on well-crafted digital experiences that really make a difference in the learning for the students. For example, rather than loose scraps, scanned digital text, or maybe an image, we really like to look at the user experience being greatly enhanced by both navigation and the design of the knowledge. Andrew, why don't you start and why don't you talk a little bit about your unique position in this as a focus on digital curriculum?
Sure. One of the key components that we realized early on was that everybody learns at a different pace and has a different learning style. And so we've created a platform that does an individualized diagnostic and then uses not just AI, but machine learning to build a specific learning path for that individual and then gives them feedback throughout. So I think it's critical, Doug, that if you're going to be working with the technology, that it has the ability to dive down and provide an individualized learning path.
Cool, thanks. Steve, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the challenge, and it was discussed on the prior call, is it always comes down to engagement. Can you fully engage that student in the digital platform, or are they trying to game that platform to get some time back to go do something else? As an example, a lot of video-based learning platforms, the video is something that can be fast-forwarded, scrubbed all the way to the end, and then you complete your assignment, and you don't really, that student's really not been through it the way that they should have. And so the question that we've pondered is, how do you drive this engagement? And one of the products that I developed at Carnegie was with an amazing team of both researchers and product developers, was a thing called MathStream. And MathStream as a product was, we tried to create the experience of, number one, the experience of being in the classroom, and number two, having every student be fully engaged, almost as the teacher's handing you the chalk, right? So it's a video-based platform. We used, interestingly enough, we used teachers who were already, in some respects, authenticated on the internet, because these were math influencers that had, large followerships, 1.5 million followers in one case, and that were, proven in front of the camera. And then we created an experience where you couldn't fast forward, and you were going to be asked questions within the video, almost as if, again, the teacher's handing you the chalk. And if you didn't get a certain amount of those questions right, you were going to retake that lesson, which, by the way, means that students were never going to fail. They were going to be given the opportunity to redo it until they learned the material. So, in other words, outcomes were fixed, but the time invested was variable, right? Which is kind of counterintuitive to schools. And then in addition to that, we gamified it with points and coins and things like that. And, this drove unprecedented levels of engagement. In fact, we worked with researchers at the University of Minnesota who study engagement. And they were going, for some reason, this thing that you built is pushing engagement off the charts. And I think for me, that's the hidden thing that we all have to focus on, is what engages the student the most and what's going to keep them engaged when they have so many things right within reach that can distract them, right? So that's what we focused on. I think that's for me, the essence of a great digital curriculum is something that can maintain engagement of the student.
Great. Yeah, I've been thinking about the engagement thing a lot throughout this whole webinar, just the different solutions and what educators are saying. And I can remember back in, when I used to have to walk uphill both ways barefoot in the snow going to school. The engagement was 100% to the teacher. Like you had a book. There wasn't a digital device. There wasn't an app. There wasn't Facebook. There wasn't all these other things that are distracting the kids from actually engaging in the learning. And imagining the struggle for teachers and what they're having to go through to use that, but at the same time use it to engage the kids without them becoming dispersed. So you guys tracking with me?
Yes.
So Andrew, what's your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. How do you engage when there's so many vehicles that can disengage students, right? They've got their phones, they've got all sorts of distractions going on. And so I agree with Steve, is that you have to encompass the environment when you're looking at this thing. And that's one of our SEL tools, helps you identify some of the environmental trends and challenges that are taking place. I mean, we had one school, my goodness, they responded that they're hungry. The students responded that they're hungry, and the principal called and I said, I've never seen this before. And he said, I haven't either. We have free lunches and free breakfasts, so I'm not sure why they're responding that they're hungry. And then we did the diagnostics and realized that while the school bus was getting there on time for the students to get into school, they weren't getting there in time for breakfast. And so imagine if you're hungry, what kind of learning outcome that you would have. And so we were able to help adjust the bus schedule to get there on time. So I think Steve is absolutely right. And Doug, I think you're onto something when you talk about looking at the environment, and it has a huge effect on the learning outcomes.
Cool. Steve, anything you want to say about that or anything else?
No, I totally agree. I think the environment is really, really important. And the additional challenge, and this is a function of COVID, that I think presents for teachers, is we have a broader distribution of where students start in any given academic year, right? In that classroom, you don't have a nice, tightly knit group of students who are all in the same place, right? They are more dispersed than ever. And I think that presents an incredible challenge for teachers, because they're being peeled off to treat every student as an individual, which can be incredibly demanding of time. And I just read a recent study from the Office of Educational Technology, and they're saying teachers are spending 50 hours a week, where only 49% of that time is actually in teaching. So there's a lot of this administration. So now take that 49 and start to divide it up in an environment where you have to treat almost every student as an individual. And it's an incredibly, that environmental challenge is part of what I think digital curriculum needs to help with, and it not to replace the teacher, but to provide that scaffolding that the situation is demanding, where you have almost this requirement to treat every student as an individual, which you should, but you don't have the economies of being able to teach everybody because they're not all in the same place like you used to.
Yeah, you want the teacher to be able to take that curriculum and use it so that they can teach the kid, not the teacher running around with their head cut off trying to figure out how to teach each kid. Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. Well, let's go on and let's look at, and I'll start with you, Andrew. What do you have going on new, and what's interesting that you think educators need to know about Shmoop?
Yeah, I think when you looked at the big four that you guys had presented earlier today, I found it very interesting. Shmoop addresses 3 of those 4 challenges, right? When you look at absenteeism, our Heartbeat platform, we've got schools in Texas that they were suspending on average 1 student a week, and after using Shmoop, they suspended 4 kids all year. And so we are increasing engagement and lowering absenteeism. And then when you look at teacher shortage, as Steve commented earlier, I mean, the teachers have to come up with individualized plans for all of these students, and they have 49% of their day. to do it, and good luck. It isn't going to happen. And so the reality is that Shmoop is the only platform that I'm aware of that is really student centered, so that the teachers can then say, hey, look, spend your time in here, and it's going to give you a diagnostic of where they are, so you can work on that gap analysis. And so, and then when you look at the homeschooling market, they will come to us significantly for content. So I think, one, we address some of the major problems or challenges that are in the market today. And then I think when you look at our Heartbeat platform, some of the feedback that we've gotten is it's a great tool, but we're not well equipped to manage the next steps. And once we've identified some of these children in need or students in need, so we'll be integrating, we'll be making some announcements here fairly soon with some licensed counselors, and so that the school can flip the switch and you can have licensed counselors work with your students too as well. So I think you'll start to see a lot of individualized packages coming forth in the very coming months.
That's exciting.
Yeah, we're excited.
I like that. Okay, cool. Steve, over to you.
At Carnegie, I think what's interesting about Carnegie, first of all, we're a 25-year-old company founded on a product that was basically the application of AI in education. So we were doing this 25 years ago. But what I also think is interesting about Carnegie Learning Profile is we were founded by researchers, and we have a very large research organization within the company. Obviously, we build educational products, but about 40 to 45% of our revenue comes from professional learning, where we are actually helping teachers teach, and that's both in an agnostic way of just helping them be better math teachers, for example, but it's also helping them embrace these advanced products that we've developed and really make them easy to use and to understand. I think around that, with the recent advent of, we have large language models, which are now being labeled as, AI, as if it's a new thing. AI has been there a long time, but with the advent of large language models, the way in which digital curriculum can be developed can become a lot more efficient. That means that, I think the advantage of that is that schools will be able to see digital curriculum, be more attainable. And then the other thing that kind of goes with that is this notion that, being able to generate content starts to shift to even being able to develop more and more individualized learning paths, right? So, and that was a discussion from prior session, but I think it's, the interesting thing when you look at it is you can believe in hyper individualization, where every kid's going to get exactly what they need when they need it, have this personal guide that takes them through that. Or you can believe in supercharging the teacher, so that the way in which they manage this curriculum in a classroom, where they're really at the lead of this. And I think we believe in the latter. But part of that is facilitating through, curriculum that can shape itself around the needs of the individual student. Yeah. So that's been our passion, and that's what we're continuing to grow on. And I think what makes me love working at Carnegie Learning.
Cool. And I'm chuckling a little bit because your comments are almost matching exactly part of the briefing by our CEO this morning, just in regards to individualizing the learning for the kids. And I believe, Andrew, you were there for that. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, dead on. I mean, the research that you guys have done, I was quite impressed with. And so the results that we see when you can individualize the learning path and the learning plans for these students are enormous. I'll give you an example. We not only provide standardized test prep like ACT or the SAT or AP, but we also have individualized state tests. And the state of Texas has something called the TSI exam. And we worked with a group in Dallas that the best they could do was a 33% pass rate on the TSI exam. And when we delivered our solution and had the individual learning paths for these, we were able to increase that to 66% pass rate within 12 weeks. And the impact is twofold. One, to the student, in the fact that if you can pass this exam, you can take dual enrollment credit courses. So conceivably you could graduate high school with your associate's degree. And if you look at the cost of tuition today's, it's 20 grand a year. You just saved your parents possibly $40,000. Right. And then when you look at the school gets reimbursed somewhere between $3,000 and $7,000. And so you have several schools that are leaving millions of dollars on the table. And so if you can come in with an individualized learning tool that can help these students improve, it's impressive. And so I think that the research is dead on and the statistics will prove it.
Cool. Lonnie, are you on? Is there anything you want to say about this? Okay, I guess she's not. Maybe she'll jump here in a few minutes. So thank you both for those comments, you guys. As we look ahead, what do you think priorities for schools need to be in regards to how they're building out their digital curriculum? And Steve, let's start with you.
Okay. For me, there's this often overlooked thing that I've seen in a number of products and solutions that I've seen in the market, and it's this almost blind spot that we have for the parent persona. Yes, parents get report cards and they have to chase down their kids and make sure they do their homework. But what's interesting for me is the fact parents don't have good visibility into the student data as it's getting generated. They only get the sort of the final report card, and then it's kind of too late to do anything about the grade. And I really think that with all the data that we're collecting, and assuming that we can get through some of the data access issues associated with security and privacy, I think there is an opportunity to engage parents in ways that we never have contemplated before. And I'm not talking about homeschooling. I'm talking about where they can be an integral part of really understanding where their kids are in their learning journey and be a better factor. I know for myself, when I raised my 3 boys with my wife, it was very hard to know how to help them at home. And we got those final report cards, but I really feel like we're on the precipice of something where with data and the kind of digital solutions that we've been developing, that Andrew's been developing, we're on that front where the parent can be more engaged, more informed, and be a better agent for accelerating their students' performance, their child's performance.
Awesome. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I absolutely concur with Steve. I think when you look at digital curriculum and the market today, you have to encompass a holistic approach, right? It's not just what did they learn today? It's all the environmental factors that come along with it. How can your parents help you? What are the other resources for you? So I concur with Steve. He is absolutely correct that we have to look at it from a holistic perspective.
Okay, cool. And this is something we like to ask companies in the market because we hear things from educators and we hear things from vendors. And Andrew, I'll start with you. What's the sales process like for you with schools? Like, how does that all come about? What's the cycle?
Sure. We're unique in that we also sell from everything from individual subscriptions to from homeschoolers to all the way to states. Like the state of Utah uses us for its ACT test prep. And so the cycle is different in each one of those cases, but it's typically this is the time of the year where schools or institutions will want to pilot your program, see what's going on. And then if it works well and they get the data back, then they'll put it into the budget for the June, July, August timeframe. So that's typically the sales cycle is what it goes through.
Okay, cool. Steve?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because, it really is a function of, I think, how our sales team engages the market. And, we've got good examples and bad examples, but the one that seems to work the best, for, at least as I observe it, is where we can come in with something that is not a large curriculum adoption, but come in with something where, for example, we can provide an academy for teachers to come in and learn how to better teach math. The kinds of offerings that build trust with that school district, that when they start engaging with us, in ways that are not the big deal and the big, big adoption. They can start to get to know Carnegie Learning, what we're about. And those are typically the things that, enable us to build trust over time. And then when we're at a place where we're looking at the large curriculum adoption, we're more of a known entity. You've got to remember Carnegie Learning right now is not, we're playing in about 3 to 4% of the market with the curriculum products. But I think the way that we extend that growth is by leading again with these offerings that are non-cyclical. It's essentially something school districts need all the time, and use that as a platform to build trust for the other transactions. The other aspects of this is looking at really the 3 tiers of learning. Tier 1 being curriculum, tier 2 being the supplemental products, and then tier 3 being tutoring, which we're all involved in all of those. But finding a way to bring those together in over the course of the sales cycle. So that's kind of how we do it.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Steve. Okay, cool. Good. So you two just happened to be in front of our predictions panel of educators, which is at the tail end. So I was curious to hear your thoughts. Future-wise, where do you see schools going? What do you see occurring in the next year, 2 years, 5 years? Where are we headed? Andrew, why don't you start?
Sure. I think that where we're headed is to what you look at is that inclusive learning environment, and the fact that there are so many challenges, Doug, out there that didn't exist 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it's going to take fresh minds to approach some of these things. And then the way to do that is to include as many people as you can in trying to solve some of these challenges. And we talk about AI, and there's, it doesn't matter which side of the fence you stand. The reality is it's here, and we're going to have to deal with it. And so getting everybody involved and getting those voices in the room is going to be critical in order to solve these challenges. And so I see it, to be quite frank with you, as a great opportunity for inclusive. I also see it as there is a more demand on teachers today than there ever has been in the past. And I think it's fantastic. What a great opportunity for these teachers to make an impact in people's lives. And so very excited about where this future and what's coming.
Yeah, and I'll ask you one more question, Andy, with your last comment.
Yeah.
With what you do at Shmoop, how are
Yeah.
you helping the teachers achieve that goal?
Oh, it's great question. When we look at it and you say we have a teacher shortage, and so the ones that are there are already burned out. So the reality is the Shmoop platform goes in and does an awful lot of diagnostic work, and so it takes the burden off of the teacher, right? So they can say, hey, spend some time in Shmoop, and then we'll give you the diagnostics, and so I can focus on, Doug, here are your strengths, here are your weaknesses. Let's go focus on where we need to improve, and it gives you a path. So it alleviates the teachers from a lot of the challenges that they have to go through. And I'll leave you with this. Prior to coming to Shmoop, I was in the remote proctoring business, and so we were selling mostly to higher ed. And it was always interesting when we first came up with the technology that you could take your test anywhere; it didn't matter, and we would be able to monitor you. How much pushback that we got from educators? Like, that's never going to work. It's not going to work. And I would look at. I remember talking to the SUNY school system, and they were like, well, it's too expensive, we can't do it. And then I would look, I said, well, look at Australia, and you look at its export GDP, and the third line item outside of iron ore and coal is they export more education to India and China than anybody else on the planet, to the tune of about $30 billion a year. And I said, you guys, we just have to adapt, utilize the technologies to improve what you're doing. And I think the same thing here goes, it will go play in the K-12 space. So we're utilizing technologies. It will drive the growth.
Awesome, Andrew. Steve, what's your thoughts on the future? Where are we headed?
I've always been inspired by Sir Ken Robinson. I'm sure you guys have watched some of his TED Talks, but He talked about the dilemma of our modern education system. It was built for the industrial area, but it never really recognizes the unique differences of students and how everyone needs to be nurtured a little bit differently. Their gifts are different and they're going in different places in their lives, right? We have this almost sausage machine. And I think it's being challenged now with, uh, from a number of aspects. But when I look at this and I see the way AI is coming in to this, I actually look at this and think about the way that AI can, we should not be making our teachers be data scientists. We should be making them be teachers. And so what AI can do is be the data scientist for the teacher and show them where to spend their time and what to do with it and guide them in the things that, cause them to join the teaching profession to begin with. Um, but around that, be able to shape the curriculum more to the natural gifts and aspirations of the child. And I think it's a very counterintuitive way of looking at things, but this is the thing that I think is exciting about where education can go is unleashing every human's potential, not unleashing some humans' potential because it fits within the way that the standardized testing works, right? So for me, that's the exciting part and where I think the emerging technologies have the potential to take us.
Awesome, Steve. Okay, so I'm going to turn the hosting over to our CEO, Leilani, for a final question to you two, but I want to say congratulations to you both and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, I'm Leilani, and you've probably met me before, but I want to speak to you as curriculum developers and tools that schools are using from a developer perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm going to harken back to the fact that we really think, and this is speaking back of what you just said, Steve, the structure is going to change, the form of it's going to change. I talked a lot about that in this morning's briefing. With the convergence of recommendations engine AI, voice AI, generative AI, and embedded AI, and now the big zinger in the pie is spatial temporal AI. We think that there's going to be a drive in the curriculum arena on two fronts. One of those is figuring out a way to open the kimono, so to speak, on your side so AI can see it, even if it's just the tags of the pieces of things, so that it can be using recommendations of what might be useful for that child next. So that's going to be the first part of the question, then I'll get to the second part. So what are your thoughts on that first? And Andrew, do you want to go first?
Actually, I'll let Steve go first and I'll jump in on his
Okay.
comments. He's done pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah, this is really interesting, Leilani. I wanted to share something that we're doing, and we just had kind of a breakthrough in this past week, which I'd love to share with you because I think it plays into this. We've been playing around with generative AI for generating video, and I spoke a little bit earlier about a product called MathStream, where we had videotaped, some of the world's best math influencers teaching lessons and then building interaction around it. But that process is very expensive. So we have been experimenting. We took one of our influencers, Robert Adut, who is tremendous. He's got a YouTube channel called Yay Math. And we've been working with him over the past year, really experimenting with how do we generate Robert Adut style content without Robert Adut. And the reason for that is not that we want to replace the mainline instruction that he gives. It's that when a child has a misconception, we want to deal specifically with that misconception through the technology, right? So past week, I just saw the most recent video we generated. Robert took it and played it for his mother, and she could not tell that it wasn't real. Now, that's pretty astonishing because it has so many layers of implications. For example, are we duping kids? Do we have a responsibility to say this video is artificially generated? How do we compensate Robert for generating these videos? It's a new domain, but what it unleashes is this absolute avalanche of content, if it's well designed, that we can actually start dealing with the individual instruction for a child, right? Through whatever the misconception is or the thing that they need right at that point in time. So it was one of these moments for me that was like, wow, there was this thing called the uncanny valley, and now it's gone. And where do we go from here? Right? It poses so many questions, but also starts to give us clues about what we can do, responsibly and productively with this capability that's going to help kids in the future. So for me, I don't know if I hope that answers your question, but there's an aspect to this that is around how we can really generate the learning paths around the individual needs of a child and do that through something that is going to be equally engaging as um,
Well,
something.
that's an amazing capability, because people in the mass media are calling it deep fakes, right? Like, this is a deep fake video and this is deep fake photo. It's not even a real person. But that aspect puts a really positive spin on it, like, the ability to positively create things in a new unit of time that aren't human intensive, right? Like, that's amazing. Like, even animation has come a really far way. So that's really great. But what I really mean to say is, you've got this company which is doing these things in these subjects, and I'm talking to you too, Andrew. And there's a lot of other companies similarly. Nobody has exactly the same craft, but they have a lot of pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And what AI is going to try to do in the future is be able to see behind your firewall what you have, but not take it, which it's doing right now. Like, basically, generative AI is a souped up search engine, right? It looks at all that stuff and then runs some algorithms against it to collate it and make sense of it and put it in an order that's humanly consumable. But I'm saying, let's say I have a student in my school and I've subscribed to this curriculum, right? But this kid, maybe these 5 are just missing something in grasping fractions, right? So I want to use AI to find me the right thing. And now I'm talking about at a commercial, global level. Find me the humans, find me the piece of content, find me that, video, maybe Steve, that you guys just generated, or whatever, the test that I need to give, whatever it is, but solve me this problem, right? In order to be able to do that comprehensively, you need to not be a total silo. There needs to be a way to encapsulate without giving away the store, so to speak.
Yeah.
Tagging, assigning time to each module. Like, this module or this video takes 10 minutes to watch, blah, 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 blah. This, taking this quiz takes this amount of time, blah, blah, blah. So both time and content, I feel, in the development future of AI are going to be essential components to being able to ascertain the correct pathway, not just within an individual silo, but globally, right? Like, across everything. So what are your thoughts on that from a developmental point of view? Because, in other words, what I'm saying is your asset becomes quadruply or multiply more important to the global scene when it becomes something modularized that I can pull in. And then after I do that, I'm like, hey, this stuff is really good. I want to now use all of your stuff, kind of a thing. What are your thoughts, Steve?
Well, I think there's 2 aspects to it. One is obviously addressing what a student's misconception is. And a lot of times we talk about, an adaptive path, right? Oh, you got this question wrong, so I'm going to explain how to do that problem, right? But underneath that lies layers of things, and one of those layers is called, what's the misconception? What is it the student doesn't properly understand? And just because they got the question wrong doesn't mean you understand the misconception. And what I was talking about in the generative AIs is the ability to generate a lot of content so that we can specifically go in and address that misconception. The other layer of this is knowing the difference between a productive and a non-productive struggle, right? There is such a thing as a productive struggle, where a student is struggling to get to know a concept and you don't want to give them the answer because it's actually part of their development, right? But there's a threshold when that struggle becomes non-productive and they start to give up and they start to get frustrated and they start to turn on themselves, right? And we have a lot of technology underneath that can actually detect the productive versus non-productive struggle in products like Matthew, where that's part of the AI that we've built there. So I think there's an amalgam of these things that come together. But what happens behind that, you know, this is the struggle. There are people who've developed large language models that can't explain how they're actually working because the machine learning has kind of gone off on its own and started to develop things and provide answers. All they know is that when they provide an answer, they got it right or wrong, right? How that answer was derived is starting to become kind of elusive, right? From the standpoint of what did it tracking all of the things in the node of the learning machine of how it came up with that as a recommendation, for example. So I think there's going to be some difficulties as we go forward into this realm of being able to understand exactly how it did that, even though it did it correctly, right? So I don't know what the answer to that is. It's maybe an exciting one to start to unravel, but I do also agree that we need to be open about this as we come up with, ways of doing things that can benefit children. You
Yeah,
know,
I think
should
I want to speak at that just very specifically commercially, right? My experience running around with all of our events, regional, talking to, particularly chief academic officers and the people over curriculum purchase, is that their familiarity with the high value digital craft that you're talking about is very low. So what ends up happening is if the teachers is also very low, they go to teachers pay teachers. And they end up with the lowest value craft you can ever find that's in a digital form. It's digitized. It has no real, it might be a little widget that like moves on the screen a little bit, but it's not anywhere near the level of craft that you guys talk about, right? So the problem that I see as a publisher looking at this industry is that your stuff doesn't show up on the radar when you do a search. It's this island of well-crafted stuff behind a firewall. You got to pay to see it, right? So what I'm really talking about is how do we figure out a way to see it, but not get it?
All right. So I do have an answer for that. I apologize
Okay.
for the first time, but we are now,
Okay.
one of the initiatives I'm leading is to actually put our products on an OER platform, open education resources, so that every state has the ability to use our curriculum without having to pay for it. And they'll be exposed to products like Math Stream. The one thing they won't be able to do is assign those products to their students, but they will be able to see them and be exposed to them. So um, uh, that initiative is essentially, a key ingredient for broadening the horizons and visibility of a company like Carnegie Learning Market.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't have even gone that far. I would have gone the route of we need to create a consortium of all you companies and create the specific art of tagging and descriptors, not even giving them the view of the full curriculum, just giving them overviews, sort of just find a way to do that, right? Rather than give away the farm, kind of, so to speak, because it's really what I think the industry needs to do and where it's evolving to is yes, it needs a highly crafted interactive stuff, the stuff that's using the stuff you guys have been talking about with AI embedding and all that stuff. But they're stuck in this world of discrete digital objects that are flat. And because that's the way they think, right? Because they're not familiar enough on a national level with the good stuff. But at least tagging the good stuff for all of its innards and its time consumption and what it's doing, blah, 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 would go a really long way.
Yeah.
So that's my comment back on.
Yeah, Leilani, I might comment on that a little bit. We're on our third version of AI. Like we started with just to help us create content, right? And then we moved into our marketing team said, hey, wait a minute, we can utilize this model to help us build out the RFPs that we respond to on a district level. And so it's been an amazing tool. It saves us a boatload of time doing it. And then now our instructional designers want to use it. And so the construct that you're talking about, we are coming out with a new, basically freemium model, which will then give you that data without giving you the quote unquote that secret sauce. And so I think the freemium model has a play here, and we are actually hammering out those details at this point in time that can give people access to this curriculum and this information. But at the same time, if for all the research and effort and everything we put into it, that there's a paid version too as well, so we can monetize it.
Yeah, but both of you guys just talked about freemium level. I don't even know that you'd have to go that far. I'm just going to give you that
don't.
advice.
Right.
I think
No,
I think the depth of what needs to be done is retail, right? Like if
Yeah.
you go to Amazon, you get a full description of the waist size, the length, the type of material.
Sure.
You still take a leap of faith when you buy it. I'm just saying, Because it comes to you and you're like, man, this material is really thin. I didn't realize that. I'm not going to be able to wear this or whatever, right? But it's a retail model with all the full descriptors and images and blah, 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 blah. It's kind of like your websites are doing now, but your websites, I don't know, there's 10,000 companies in this space in digital curriculum in the United States, at least, right? And some of them they don't even show up at the big trade shows because they're just going for the homeschoolers, right? You've never even heard of them. I've seen them. So the issue is that when it comes down to like, what's perfect for this kid at this time is, you know, how am I going to find the right thing? And the ability to do that is a full engagement with you in order to see it. So I get your freemium model, but I actually think you don't even need to go that far. I think it's a retailing catalog of some kind that's really necessary for everybody to come together in one place. We need an Amazon. We need an Amazon of all the stuff available. We don't have it. This is weird for such a big market. Anyway, that's just my observation. Okay, so one last question, and because I think we only have 3 minutes. We talked much earlier, and I talked with one of the other panels, and also at the beginning with the briefing, about the fact that what's coming as particularly as spatial temporal AI comes in, is a need to be able to know how much time is in each module or part or task given by advanced crafted digital software. So question for you from a development perspective, are you going to start putting that in, or what are your thoughts on that? Andrew, you go first.
You bet. We have it today. We have in some of our diagnostic tools, we have timed assessments as well as time you should be spending on the material, and we measure against that. So we actually have it today because I think it's a critical component if you're really going to do your data analytics.
Yeah, I totally agree. Steve, what's your thought?
Yeah, and to your point about metadata and tagging, duration of how much student time is going to be involved in that task is an absolutely essential meta tag. And it is part of the way that we're developing the Clear Learning Center, which is really this way in which teachers can granularly make assignments to students and know how much of that student time they're taking up, but also handcraft the assignments to what those students' needs are. So, but I'm going to think a lot about your meta tagging big idea here, because I think we are in an industry now where, and I've seen this in across my career in digital learning, which is as much as we try, the organization of content and learning is almost like walking into a grocery store that got hit by a hurricane, right? It's like everything's all over the place, right? And you're putting the teacher into that experience, saying, okay, go find where this is and assemble it with this and then give it to your student, right? And it's very difficult. And I do think that it's the tagging that's going to help us organize all of this in a way that it's easier to use and receive. So yeah, we're definitely doing that. I think the whole meta tagging thing is a big part of how you organize information into a Clear Learning Center, which is what this next delivery platform is for Carnegie. But it is a challenge, and you know, I'll just add to that, which is, you know, teachers today, you know, they don't have one of us; they've got 3 or 4, right? Different learning management systems for different products that they have to sign in and sign out, and that just, you know, kind of compounds the problem. So I do think that's a grand challenge that we should be working together to find a way in which content be organized so that digital information can be easier to use by teachers.
Yeah, and the analytics pulled out of those individual silos and collated into a master. There is just so you know, Steve, I have a plan, not just talking. I'm working on this too. So that's awesome. Well, thank you, Steve, so very much. And thank you, Andrew, so very much for being with us and providing your fantastic insights today. I'm going to release you back to non-being on video so I can welcome my next guest.